Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. I'm your host, Ross Stockdale, joined with our guest, Michael C. Clark. Michael is going to talk to us about personality pitching and how to build the skill of confidence to make big ask to make a big impact. Michael, stoked to have you on today. I have to ask, so is this what you've always wanted to do when you grew up, when you're a kid?
Not at all. When was growing up, wanted to fly like planes in the Air Force. Believe it or not, that's what I wanted to do. What you know how when I was with my dad and he would introduce me, tell him what you want to be when you grow up. I was like, oh, I want to join the Air Force and fly planes, but that didn't work out. I didn't do that. But always was really just love communicating, being around people. Growing up, I wanted to be that. And then later on, I had aspirations of going to law school. And I did a year at a really good law school. And that wasn't for me. So I took a little different turn. But between flying in the Air Force and law, here I am today, helping startups make a lot of money.
Now, what was it about law school that originally drew you into it? And what was it when you were in what the year you were there that said, not for me?
Yeah. It was one of those things. Sometimes you think that a profession, like if I get this degree, it will be the answer, end all, be all. And when I was there, I didn't have the passion. Really, the drive was getting there, getting in, LSATs. And sometimes you know, there's doing the thing as a lawyer and then there's getting there. And I think I was making that more the focal point. And then once I
Mm.
got into law school, it just didn't feel like a good fit. But it was good though. It made me land at a law firm and I ended up working with a law firm for a number of years. And that really fashioned a lot of who I am today from a client perspective. And still is an international law firm. So that landing there still was a good fit.
Yeah, it's interesting when you have a goal set for a destination and then you reach it. And then you're like, now what?
Exactly, exactly. It's like, well, where do I go from here? But listen, that's the great thing about life is that you end up, landing exactly where you're supposed to be. I always loved to write, so I started writing film and television projects. And film and television projects have to be pitched and have to be funded, and
Mm.
that's how I started with pitching because I had to fly out to California and pitch at Paramount and on other studios and lots. And what happened, one, and this is like kind of the origin story of it, I would be always get to the meeting last. And I'm like, Mike, what's going on? And it was because I was nauseous. I was so nervous about pitching. I'm back at the Mondrian Hotel on Sunset, puking because I'm so shook about the meeting. And I remember my colleagues like, Mike, you okay? You got bubble guts? What's going on? I'm like, no, it's a meeting. Now, when I got in,
Mm.
I would compose myself and pull it together, but there was some real nervousness. And it's funny because when people see me pitch and present today, they're thinking, "Oh, you're just a natural." I'm like, no, no, no. This started at a place of sickness, not a place of grace, coming out of the womb, being able to pitch a project.
I am a mixed martial arts super fan, and one of my favorite fighters of all time is George St. Pierre, and he had the same thing before walking into the cage every time,
Mhm.
except for once when he lost. Okay, so
Yep.
every time that he was supremely nervous, nauseous, it's because your body is psychologically prepared and it's
Mhm.
important to you. It means a great deal. I love the concept that nerves can either be fear or excitement, depending on how you look at it. How has that changed over time? Do you still get that feeling in your stomach, or is it like riding a bike to you? How does it ever subside?
Well, it becomes more and more manageable. I always give the analogy of an actor. When they get a
Mhm.
role, as you know, with method acting, they have to learn their lines, they practice it, and they have to be ready once they're on set. They say they practice, they're in their trailer, they're on the lot, they get on set, and then it's action. And I use the method of the same way. You have to be ready when the lights go up, when you step out on stage. Now, what's nice is once they say cut, you can go back to being the normal you. And I find that even with clients, that kind of lets them off the hook because they think, well, if I work with you, I have to one, be you, or I have to always be on and be this extrovert. I'm like, no, no, no. We're going to get your lines. We're going to get everything down. So when the meeting starts, when the Zoom starts, the lights go up, you walk out on stage, action, you can perform to the day.
That analogy of treating business meetings and presentations as a method actor, I haven't heard or thought of before, but I want to dig into that
Sure.
because as someone that was also had aspirations for law school, and luckily my advisor right before graduation said, "Is this what you've always wanted to do when you grow up?" I said, "No." He goes, "Then don't go down the path. It's too expensive and you're gonna regret it." I was so grateful to go to a liberal arts school where I got to try a bunch of things, and some of that was film and some of it was theater. And I think the the improv theater class that I took in school
Mhm.
was I no matter if you wanna be a plumber, no matter if you wanna be a doctor, I think everyone should take an improv theater class
Sure.
because it teaches like, the idea of stage fright, they put me in front of an auditorium of 400 people in my underwear as playing Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh
So,
my
what
gosh.
that was my first ever play, and
Nice.
the benefit of that is once you get exposed to the thing of fear, it loses I don't wanna say it loses power, but, like, you understand that, like, you're not made out of glass, like, you can do it.
Sure.
And, also, when it comes to like you said, you love to write and television and film, there's not that much difference to outlining a paper or a play or a story than there is to, like, setting an agenda or making out a go-to-market strategy.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
and to add to that, a couple of things. One, when it comes to the fear that people have when it comes to presenting and pitching, I make it really clear. Your brain lies to you and you can't trust your emotions. Your brain is telling you they're going to say no. Your emotions are saying, I don't even deserve to be here, or the money is so important. Here I am. I'm not this, I'm not that. So going back to the method acting part of it, I always tell clients, someone who's in venture capital, private equity, high net worth individual, and angel, they want to be able to look across the table or into the camera, into the Zoom, and see another multi-million dollar person sitting across to them. Not the, no, I'm going to work really hard. Whoa, 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 whoa. Are you going to lead the company or you want to work for the company? I'm really smart. That's great. But I need to be able to know that you can build relationship, that you can pivot, that you can meet challenges. And the reason that you kind of have to act into the moment is that a lot of what I do with a client is letting them realize, wait a minute, your idea has traction, have customers, it has value. You have to have a little bit of swag and bravado coming into these meetings. And I don't care if you've only raised $10,000 and it was from friends and family. You think when Uber Cab or Facebook, when they were pitching, they still had to come in the same way. And think about it this way. And I say to a client, are you the next Uber cab? And I call it, as we know, Uber, that was the original name of it, but it's like, are you the next Uber? Are you the next Airbnb? Oh, you are? Okay. Well, before you have the big exit, before you get the first $1 million, I need you to act that way. I need you to present that way.
Ye exactly. That frame of, "If you are who you say you are, then have no fear," Lupe Fiasco, but act the way that you know that you are, and if your pitch or your story or your pro forma, whatever the document is you're presenting, you believe in it, I think that there's a lot of like you said, there's the psychological, there's the emotional, there's even the health part where it's managing there's the human element, right? To manage the physical reactions. But I want to tell you a quick story to highlight that I'm getting that goosebump, eerie feeling that what you help people is something that if I had a time machine and I could have talked to you, I could have shortened the pain curve. 2019 started a PE firm with a partner, and we were not 30 yet at that time. We were in our 20s, and we had this great idea. This guy, my partner was a finance wizard. I did marketing. We went together, and it took us a year and a half to get our first deal done.
Mm.
And there was a bunch of try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. And when we finally found the project that we knew would be a winner, we probably spent 6 months just on the deck and the presentation and rehearsal, like everything that we had to do before we had to get in the room. So by the time we got in the room, Michael, I probably could still rehearse like page 8 out of 10 to you
Exactly.
because you get so darn prepared because you're just tired of getting your butt kicked. So how do you help people like who I was to shorten that pain curve
Yeah.
or walk them through the journey so they don't quit?
And I love you saying that because I will tell you, I'm a funding advisor on Open VC, and I get a lot of inquiries every single week. And the biggest question is, can you put me in front of investors? Can you bring me investors? Can you invest? And to your point, way before even being ready for an investor, they have to be ready for an investor. And that doesn't mean like, oh, we've got this great idea, we've got this great traction. It is the pitch. It is your ability to present, to build relationship because so many VCs and angels, they're seeing thousands of presentations. What stands out is the you of this. That guy Ross, oh my God, his energy, tenacity, just love the way he articulated, made sense, born leader, amazing. Now, to answer your question, how do you do that? Many times it's holding up, I call it the mirror, but it's the rear view mirror. Because one, they see themselves already as no, this is this amazing idea and I can do it. But I'm like, no, no, no. I need to position you as the CEO of the organization that will be able to lead it. Again, even before big point here I got to make is presenting in that way, even before the first dollar comes in. Because what's so great is that you are that amazing leader that's brought the organization to this point. Now we have to build a cohesive story that one is clear, concise. I call it being valuable, that clearly articulates the big problem you're solving, clearly articulates the transformation that your product or service is going to bring. And again, it's really as I'm preparing this is like, I'm saying this for the first time publicly, but I'm preparing for some TED Talk submissions. And my topic is you pitch the mirror of pitching, meaning you pitch as you see yourself. And what I have to
Mm,
do is change that image that people see in the mirror. Sometimes people see themselves as, oh, yeah, well, they see themselves. I'll give you a great example. If they're just quote unquote, they see themselves as just a coder, just an engineer. They see themselves, and that's how they see themselves. And well, I'm going to get somebody in to do this and get someone. No, no, no. You built this organization. Like, I need to see that you're a leader. I need to see who you are right now. Now, what's nice, and I'll give it back to you, is we're just they also don't realize they have to bring a company to just a level, not the full exit. We're going to bring in a CEO. We're going to bring in a team. There is going to be a COO, CMO if you don't have one already. These pieces can be pulled in. A lot of people don't realize that. They see themselves
yes.
like, I'm going to be here with the $10 billion exit. Oh, like, I'm not saying you're not going to be here, but not in the role that you think.
They almost look at getting to the next level as some masterful stunt parkour feat where they have to jump on walls and make this
Yeah.
acrobat versus getting a ladder and taking it one rung at a time.
Exactly. And I love that example. I love that example of the latter because to your point, and also too, understanding that it's a partnership with whoever comes on board financially versus like this servant leader, like this servant and
Yeah.
type of thing. Cause sometimes people have this image of, yeah, well, you know what? I really don't want to take an investment because I don't want to have to answer to anybody. I'm like, well, unless you're independently wealthy, you will always answer to someone.
You guess what? You know what the biggest myth is of starting your own business for anyone listening? That you don't have a boss. That is the biggest
Exactly.
myth I can't work for somebody else. Well, guess what? You work for your customers.
Exactly.
Every single one of your clients, I don't want to say they're you're necessarily your boss, but like you are beholden, you have a stake in the relationship that
Yep.
you have to be accountable. And when they have pain points, you're there to solve them. If you have employees, I would say as an employer, I was like more beholden to my employees to make sure that I was invested and accountable and a good leader than I cared when I was an employee before.
Exactly. Exactly. Because as an employee, right, there's someone else that's doing the caring at different levels. It's not you. It's HR, it's marketing, it's a project manager, you're an individual contributor. And that's a big thing too. If anyone's listening, I would say that's one of the biggest adjustments going from individual contributor to leader of an organization, or if you have any C suite position at a startup.
And the biggest jump for me, I would say, was not going from management or like a W-2 employee, like mid-level management to then like C-suite. The biggest jump was going from an IC to a manager.
Okay.
That was a great, because it made sense at least to a degree once I had management experience. But my first year, maybe year or 6 months as a manager was awful, stunk,
Mhm,
and it's because I thought that that identity shift, like we talked about earlier, was like taking the elevator and I needed to just teleport to the top versus, building skills over time and kinda taking it easy on myself. I almost, like, faked the role of management before, because I didn't know what I was doing, and then once you start to build the skills and you identify, like, "Okay, this is how the whole organization like needs to function and you have a new role in it," it becomes a lot easier once you get that self-awareness. And to your, I want to really dive into your point about holding up the mirror. If I didn't just have a conversation last night with somebody who's pitching a business to a board of advisors, and this is not what I do, I don't do what you do. And my only feedback to this person was, if you can get them to see and understand what you do the way that I see and understand you do,
mhm.
that's the goal. So, from a psychological standpoint, this person I was talking to is one of my favorite people to do business with, high regards, high respected. And even the people at the top, they've got their own stuff going on. So, how do you take the principles of psychology and storytelling and apply it to build? Because at the end of the day, you said partnership. Like, you need to be able to see eye to eye and work as a team.
Yeah.
How do you get people into the framework that, I guess, everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time?
Yeah, it really starts, and this is where you had mentioned before, many times with a business, we're thinking slides and information and data, spreadsheets, but many times it goes back to an individual's mindset. So I really do start individually to get a feel for where they're at. How do they see themselves? How do they see their business? What have been some of their biggest wins and biggest losses? And the reason I make that point is because many times I'll see it with startups and entrepreneurs. They're either trying to fight or make up for their biggest loss.
Mm,
Even when I didn't finish law school, I had to also make sure that I wasn't trying to make up for it for years to come. So part of that is kind of cracking that mindset to say, you know what, anything that happened before you engaged me, that's it. It's
mm,
done. I'm not a therapist. I don't care what happened at 5, 15, or 25. I want to deal with this point on. And from this point on, I need you to see yourself already as an amazing CEO, leader, founder of an organization that is going to impact thousands, if not millions of people. And then as I take a deeper dive into messaging, because a lot of times their messaging I feel is somewhat disconnected. That ability to articulate the clear big problem they're solving, and they've got, well, it's this instead. I just need just 1 or 2 lines. Tell me the big problem you're solving, and see when you met with your friend last night, a couple of things. 1, you listened to it with a different ear because there was relationship there. There was no misgivings, you didn't hold back. It was an open door relationship. The way I show people how to quickly build that rapport is the understanding that people within the first 4 to 5 seconds are making the decision whether they're gonna do business with you. Everything from visual to the first couple of words you say. So
mm.
being able to really start out with a punch of something as simple as, "Ross, how you doing today? How was your day? What do you have planned for the weekend?" Being able to really relate and connect with whoever you're selling or pitching goes a long way. So the how do you do it, reframing, getting an idea of where they're at in terms of their mindset, their biggest loss, biggest win. And again, and the reason I asked about the biggest win is because I want to be able to say, oh, success leaves clues.
Mm.
Let's build on that success. Let's build on that traction. And this is where also I think a balance of stats come in too, is that, I deal with this, especially in the nonprofit space. And we know how the small percentage of startups that make it to that even get their first million, but in the nonprofit space, about 5% of nonprofits ever make it to the $500,000 budget
Really?
range. Yeah, it's really low. Most are just functioning on this day to day, just bootstrapping budget. And, again, you could be a successful nonprofit and do 200,000, 100,000 and affect people.
Yeah.
100,000 over, it's a very, very low percentage. But I say that to say is that organizations, for profit and nonprofit, have these image of, no, we're looking for 5 million. We're looking for this number and that number. But the percentage that actually get that are very low. And so I say, how can we break that? How can we get into that percentage? And I was at a conference just 2 weeks ago, and I always want to keep my ear to the ground. What are VCs looking for? What's the climate? And I'm telling you, it hasn't changed. They still want people that are coachable. They still want people that are there to build relationship, that are willing to adjust to change, that are open to ideas, that want to partner, that are willing to, again, adjust and adapt. Too often, it's just the opposite. You have
Mm.
founders that say, nope, nope, this is the way we're going to do it. And no, I'm not going to, okay, no problem. You're not getting money here. No worry.
Man, there's so much gold in that. I would say the ability to be open with others shows a degree of confidence that you can't really fake.
Yeah,
You can pretend that you're the smartest guy in the world and you can't tell me this, I know better. But to me, if you can take no feedback or you can't talk about losses or you can't articulate, the duality of both wins and losses, it's only wins and we're awesome and pristine. Like no one's perfect.
exactly.
No one's perfect. Everyone has bad days. Everyone gets nervous sometimes, whether they puke before meetings or not, but you can talk about it, which makes you more confident because you can talk about it. And in
Exactly.
sales, they call that damaging admissions. And I think to your point, I want to dial in about the first, 5 seconds, the 10 seconds with the elevator pitch of nonverbal communication.
Sure.
'Cause I think that's really important. I think that's really important. It's not just like what you say, it's how you say it. How do you identify people that, in the nonprofit space in particular, they're the 5% that could be above the 500K or have the potential to be there? What is the when they're talking with you, because I'm sure you don't work with everybody that wants to work with you. What's that nonverbal, elevator pitch to you that you can say, "I'll work with them," or versus, "Nah, not for me."
Number one, definitely coachability. That when they jump on that call, they're there for feedback. That when I do, and I literally will say, like, "Hey, can I coach you on this?" And well, yeah. And I'll see that little twitch where they're like getting ready, and they think that I'm gonna blast them. But definitely coachability. Two, just like a startup, their ability to do something with nothing.
Mm,
So when they say, and I don't care whether they have just started or are well into it, meet with the organization. They'll say, "Yeah, we just started a nonprofit. We're looking to raise X amount." I'm like, "To do what?" "Well, we want to help individuals in LA to do X." "Okay, great. Well, how much do you need?" And they'll say some number. And I'll say, "Well, what can you do now with what you have?" I said, "Well, what do
mhm,
you mean?" I said, "Well, you're looking to feed individuals on Skid Row. Even if it were meaning you just connected with a local restaurant, took food down there, just to get a feel for it, started to get volunteers before this large grant comes in, before the large donor comes in. Well, we really wanted to, and that's why I start to back away, to be able to execute, to do, and even I have a lot of my nonprofits run a beta program. I had a group the other day and they said, "Yeah, we've been trying to get this. It's a life skills program for teens in high school. We tried to get it off the ground for 2 years." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean trying to get it off the ground?" "Well, we have everything written. We're trying to get a school to accept it." I said, "Well, you don't know 15 teens that you can just give Amazon gift cards to and they can go through the program for eight weeks?" "Oh my god, we never thought of that." They did exactly what I said, took them through an 8-week program, got amazing feedback, testimonials. They cut the program almost in half in terms of materials. Now it's ready to present. And I think about the same thing with startups. I'm working with a startup now where it involves, I'll just say it involves swimming.
mhm,
And I said, "Okay, great." I said, "When do you run the program?" They said, "Well, we run the program during the warmer months." I showed them how to run the program all year round. So it's that ability to just kind of pivot, be coachable, work with what you have, and know that you can't do it alone.
mm.
That whole that I mean that's universal. That thought of the hustle and grind and I got this and uh
Yeah, it's kinda hard to be a partner with a lone ranger,
yep,
you
yep,
know?
yep,
Whether that's in business stakeholdership or whether that's in, hanging out at a cookout. Like,
yeah,
if someone's like, "Don't touch the grill, it's mine," it's like, "Well,
yeah.
buddy, I'm
You
just
know,
trying to
Ross,
help."
let me say one thing too that came to mind. A big red flag is when someone says a couple of things. One, Well, I've been burned before with partners and I don't know if I wanna I'm like, "Okay, you gotta get over that." And I literally will say to them, not to get, like, emotional, but I'm like, "You gotta forgive them."
Forgiveness.
Yeah, you
Forgive yourself for your past mistakes, forgive somebody else for the transgressions, not for their benefit, for yours, so you can move on.
exactly, that you can just move on. You
Yeah.
just move on.
Yeah, yeah, not to get emotional, but when it comes to like, there was a correlation between having to speak at my mother's funeral, who
Mm,
she had an early passing, and there was a lot of emotions that came from that, at this time, and, it was right when I was starting an entrepreneurial venture and, a new business, and I just kept saying, I was like, "If I can speak in front of all these people on, like, the worst day, I sure as hell can talk to a client or a prospect."
mhm,
And I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but to the point is like, if you can look back in your life when you've been communicating a message that you really care about, that's emotionally vulnerable in front of an audience, which is what I had to do in the funeral, then it almost, like, takes the turns the noise down on any other relationship that I have to build with a
sure,
stranger or something else. Not saying that, you need to go through something that's traumatic, but you can you can morph what is perceived as negative experience into something that develops your skills and your character.
sure.
Part of the forgiveness, you know?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
So I want to talk quickly about imposter syndrome, over explaining, and people's fear of asking for the ask. I think those things are all kind of closely related in a bucket, and I know you help people solve that. So my first question on that is like, how do you define like what is imposter syndrome to you? Like what does it
Sure.
mean?
Sure, sure. Well, there's a formal definition, but when it comes to the founders that I work with, it's that feeling of are they really worthy of that $1,000,000 ask? Are they and it comes across in such a way where they try to bury themselves in facts and numbers, or they go to a space where they're comfortable when it comes to tech. Because when I'm meeting a founder for the first time, and I'll say, "Hey, go through your pitch," and that's like, "Well, did you take a look at the?" I was like, "I looked at the website. I just would love to hear your pitch." And they'll go through it, and I'm like, "Do you?" I was like, Technical background, all coding, engineering." I can tell because that's the safe place that they go to. When you talk about being able to build relationship and they're like, "Well, no, not me," and there's that shrinking back that
Mm,
happens. Or on the other hand, when it's a non-technical founder and they try to kind of fake it and they get into numbers and tech and things aren't fleshed out. And that's why, to our earlier point, it's so important to have a team. I'm a big proponent of never pitch alone. I coach
mm,
because every time when people think about pitches, they think of them just themselves. I'm like, first of all, never pitch alone. Have other people with you. Don't go through the whole pitch deck yourself. Build that team. If there's an area that you don't feel 100% comfortable with, don't fake it because we can all tell you don't feel totally comfortable and you feel like there's some imposter syndrome that you'll be found out as being non tech. I say I'm always address the elephant in the room. First of all, guys, I want to say hello. My name is Michael Clark. I am not a technical founder. So I have Ross here today that's going to handle everything technical. I want to talk about, and when people, it just lets you off the hook, draws attention to it. And I'm like,
and
all
it's
right, I love
true.
it. Yep.
And it's the truth. Like you said before, whether they're hyper technical or they're hyper not technical, by hiding or relying on data in the sheet, they're hiding.
Yeah.
Or it's and I don't want to say it's lying, but it's like omitting the truth. You're just like, here's the truth on the table. Nice to meet you.
Exactly. To the extent to that point that we can expose a buddy of mine used to say every deal has a little hair. You've heard that, about
Yeah.
hairy deals. And I'm
Yeah.
like, look, let's expose the hair. Here it is. Just want to let y'all
Yep.
know this is where the hair is. And we're already aware of it. We're on it. And
Yep.
that awareness also lets a potential investor or donor off the hook. The other question you were asking about the ask, how do they were you saying, like, how do we get them
Like
to
like why are people afraid to ask for the ask? And then how do you bridge the gap from the hesitation? Because at the end of the day, people with funds I've found have a very scarce resource that we all have, which is time. Don't waste my darn time, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, well, the way I get there, I'm of the school of thought, and I coach my clients that if we present this big, hairy problem and how we are the absolute solution for it, and here's the transformation that we're going to have in this industry, in society, on this community. By the time we get to that point where we're talking about what we're raising or the ask, we should have built an expectation or anticipation in that investor's heart to say, I want in. And the reason I make that point, even I put into client pitches FAQs all the time. We need to head off and have questions. So to make no, and I have a client go create anywhere from up to sometimes 50 frequently or potentially asked questions
Yeah.
with the answers already. Because one, that alleviates a lot of fear. Because I'm like, because I'll say to a founder, I'll say, what question do you hope they don't ask? Well, I really hope they don't ask this. Perfect. Let's get the answer for it right now.
For everyone listening, this applies to sales specifically.
Hmm.
If you don't get an objection, that's the worst objection because salesmanship starts when you start to objection handle. And if you can put the objections and guess them before they're raised and then handle them yourself, that tells the person on the other side of the table that you understand their pain or you've done the thinking work for them, that you get it. It doesn't matter where you are in the ladder, whether you're beginning, you're experienced, you're rich or poor. People really want to be understood and have, a connection. And I think a lot of connection comes from understanding.
Absolutely. And to that sales point, and you've probably heard this, of course, but just to remind the listeners, when they're asking questions, when they're objecting, they're engaged, they care,
Hmm.
right? You've got them. They just are like, if you answer this question, you might have me. And if you answer this question, you may have a sell. Just answer the question. Sometimes as we know, people look at objections as a negative thing. I'm like, no, that means they're
Mm.
listening. If they're asking about the sales, if they're asking about deliverables, if they're wonderful, ask on.
Yeah, the opposite of love is indifference,
Yep, exactly,
you know?
exactly.
And to be honest, sometimes having somebody hate your pitch and be like, this is awful, gives you the fuel you need to do the next round of pitching better.
Yes.
It's almost a better feedback than apathy. With apathy, if someone just doesn't care, they don't get back to you, lukewarm. How do you improve?
And I love that you're saying that because I remember that was a big thing in film and television is that they don't give feedback. They don't
Mm.
because piece of it's a creative work. They're not going to say, "Hey, you should really that character arc at page 77." They're not. They're not going to change your work. And it's the same thing and I love it because it's the same thing in this space because with founders, they're not here to build on or improve or fill gaps for your idea, your product, your service, your startup. And so that's many times they'll say, well, we didn't hear back. Well, did you ask? What type of engaging questions did you ask back? One of the greatest questions I was ever privy to was, and I'll role play with you, Ross, is there anything about the presentation today that would make you question your ability or willingness to invest? Anything you've heard today that would question its viability in the market? Like when you ask the right questions, you poke the bear, you'll get an answer back. Versus, what
Yeah.
questions do you have? Like, oh, I don't have any questions. Well, is there anything about the presentation that would question its viability, question your willingness to invest in us today? And then you just shut up. And that's another thing too, real quick tip. The ability to shut up, the ability to ask a question and just be
Yeah.
silent. We see that in sales, all the time. That ability to say, well, what questions do you have?
The other one is don't talk past the close. I had to learn that early on in my sales career because
Mhm.
I was one of those people in marketing where I had so much individual contributorship that I would just talk and talk and talk about all the great things we're going to do and how awesome we are. And a sales leader mentor of mine goes, "You need to shut up."
Mhm.
I say this with love, brother, is what he said to me. He goes, "You need to shut up." I was like, "What?" He's like, "They already were nodding their head and saying yes." It's like, why would every time you say something beyond the yes, you lower your chance of them being committed or actually following through or, being stoked on the deal.
Exactly. You say that one thing, they go, "Wait, what did you say?" And then you see that held tilt, the squint, and then the deal is lost.
Yeah, knowing when to to zip it is really important. And I think the way that you framed the ask was so it's just it was great because you didn't say, "So," like, almost begging, "So will you please partner with me and give me money?" It was like, "So is there anything that would" it was like Chris Voss never split the difference. "So is there anything that would make us, like, not aligned?" Or, versus the open-ended questions. I think
Yeah.
open-ended questions, like, I would say 9 times out of 10, people don't really, 1, trust you or care enough to share what they really are thinking, or 2, they don't really know what questions they have.
But going back to that sensitivity and what people may be still dealing with from the past is that a lot of people, that saying from the movie, like, you can't handle the truth. Many people are not prepared to handle feedback in the moment. Just and everyone knows that. They know
Or
that
give it,
if
or give the feedback. It's
yeah, yep,
uncomfortable.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, that's so true. You can't handle the truth. Well, then I wanna go towards the idea of, we've talked about a lot of an underlying theme of courage. How do you define courage, and how do you develop that as a skill?
Sure. Very much like we talked about kind of the acting part of it. I do a lot of role play with my clients and being able to practice the ask, the presentation. I've had clients pitch in Home Depot, literally take them. I had someone in the Christmas section just a few weeks ago presenting their pitch to Mickey and Minnie Mouse inside of Home Depot, the statues inside of Home Depot out in public, just literally out. And I had people stop and listen and say, "Oh my gosh, I would invest. I love what he's doing. I love what he's doing." But I say that to say is that it's really going to be building that solid story, building something that goes beyond the numbers, that balance of storytelling and stats, really telling a compelling message of, again, that big hairy problem they're solving, that there's solutions. So once we've got the messaging in place, you see an automatic bump in courage. And you may be saying, like, how? Because now they're seeing what they do from a different light because they were just working in the business, right? Not realizing the business itself has this great, wide impact, potential impact, whether you have $1 or you've raised 1 million. So it's really reframing their message, building their storytelling, building some solid, concise stats that we're not having these slides overloaded with graphs and numbers and text, which again, people at all levels are still doing. Then really rehearsing it to the point where, as you mentioned, you said it even now, you said you can still go through that presentation,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah. And what I hear a lot too is like, well, I don't want to sound scripted. Well, I don't want you to sound scripted either,
Yeah.
but I do want you to know this from beginning to end. Pauses and inflections, hand
Right.
movements, looking left to right. Do you think that when they present at Apple each year, they're just winging it, you know?
Do Broadway plays sound scripted? There
Exactly.
is a script, but the magic of theater is making it come alive, and you feel the feelings that are meant to be felt
That's
or
right.
not.
That's right. Because and you do it the reason we have to really rehearse it with passion is so we can say it in a concise amount of time. If you get 30 minutes with a VC, you can really only spend about 5 to 7 minutes on the deck. Everything else is answering questions, building relationship. What's the follow-up going to be? I've seen people take the 22 minutes out of 30 presenting a deck. And
No.
then there's this little bit of time left thinking, oh, well, we'll follow up. It's like, yeah, we'll follow up. I'll read your
Yeah.
thank you email and that's it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. When you talk about the 30-minute slot and you say, "You can't have 22 minutes of it be, here's my idea and pitching." You need to have 23 minutes of it being building relationships and 7 minutes
Absolutely.
of it being, "Here's the message I wanna get to you."
Yeah, and that's why if you notice, like pitch competitions, you only have 3 minutes to pitch, and that's for a reason. Like literally, you should be
Mm.
able to pitch an amazing idea in 3 minutes. You should. There's no such thing as, oh, well, my idea is different. I really got to tell you the backstory. No, it's got to make sense and be super valuable without the backstory. We need to be able to start where we're at today, and in the next 375 words, which is 3 minutes, tell me how amazing you are.
One of the things that I'm thinking of while we're having this conversation, Michael, is wanna like you love to write, big fan of writing, whether it's fiction or, research, whatever. And there was a concept an English teacher taught me about the 5 paragraph essay and how to outline and structure it. Intro, second most important point, least important point, most important point, conclusion. And that could go towards any
Mhm.
length or any amount of points. But when you can outline something and say
Yeah.
bullet point, like intro, bullet point, stat, whatever, conclusion, ask, it takes the acid out of your stomach
Sure.
when you're doing it. So I think one of the things that you've communicated to me is it doesn't matter what the hair is on the issue. It doesn't matter what the industry is, whether it's a for profit, nonprofit, whether someone's short, tall, you
Mhm.
know, white, black, who cares who you are? There are success leaves clues and there are repeatable frameworks that if you bring your personality to and you follow the plan and you act like a human and treat them like humans, it increases your likelihood of success. Is that a good way to articulate
Yes,
what?
but I think the only thing I would add to that is that act like humans from a standpoint of being natural and everyday, but there is a certain swag that you
Yeah.
have to bring to this space.
Be the superhuman version of you.
Yeah,
Be your
yeah,
best.
and I do have my clients identify that person they have to become and name it.
Mm.
Like that, who's that superhero you have to become? Because I'll give
That
you an
method
example.
acting, right?
Exactly. Like for me, like my glasses are my superhero outfit. Like when I have my glasses on, and I need them, they're prescription, but when I have my glasses on, I'm a number one. If I had to do a big presentation and my glasses broke, I was like, oh my God. All right, we got to go to CVS. I got to get some. Like, but that's my, and everybody, and another thing, just real quick, everybody has that thing that makes them feel comfortable. It be it physical, emotional, it's what they wear, it's what they drink, it's whatever it is. And even the aesthetics, I make all my clients buy a good camera, buy a good microphone, have lighting, because I'm like, if you're presenting at a multi-million-dollar level, it should not look like your camera is a potato. Just shouldn't.
Well, I number one couldn't agree more that the presentation, especially we're talking virtual, right? My podcast, I've been doing podcasting for 7 years. And in the last 365 days, I've changed, upgraded audio, upgraded video, upgraded studio. But I didn't know how much that mattered for the first 6 years. So I look back at my old stuff. I'm like, oh, that audio is grainy. That lighting is trash. What am I doing in the background? What was I wearing? That shot was awful. And I've had, this isn't by no means to brag, but this is feedback I've gotten. People have, after a podcast said, oh, you're real natural at podcasting. And I go, thanks. It only took me 300 tries.
Sure, sure. And I'm a big proponent of done is better than perfect. You start where you are. You start with the resource you have. If someone says to me, Mike, I need to do a pitch, all I've got is a phone and an open window. I say, rock with it, kill it,
Right.
bring it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But as you can, as you did,
You
upgrade and give
iterate.
your best presentation. You iterate
Yeah.
because to that point, there's some people even that want to launch a podcast, but they think, no, I got to wait till I have the $300 mic and the $2,000 camera. I'm like, no, 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 no. If what you have is of substance, it will break through the noise of your tech.
All right. We have editing, so we'll be good. We lost you. The last thing I heard was, to your point, there's some people that want to launch a podcast and it cut. So we're
Okay,
back.
perfect. Yep, I saw the something happen there. So for those that I think this also applies to individual who'd want to launch a podcast, like present where you're at. If it's a iPhone and a window, go for it. Because to that point, you can always reiterate. And if you have a great message, it'll cut through the noise of your tech. I mean, that's why you're here today. Like people were forgiving of it. Now you look back at it and it's cringeworthy,
Mhm.
but again, you were able to make it and do it. And, those were formidable days. So I'm glad you stuck with it.
And I love your idea. I love what you said too before, I have a couple more questions, but I want to just double tap on anyone listening. When you set a goal or you want to be your best, like you said with method acting, you think of who's the best version of Michael? Who's the best version of Ross? What would they do in this circumstance? How would they act? How would they present? That always moves. That you don't arrive at a destination and like, okay, I'm the best. Like no time to improve.
Mhm.
Like I think, the one constant that I've learned from talking to people this year is that everyone that I've talked to that I'm like, wow, that's admirable. They're doing really great work. They always think they got more in the tank.
Exactly, exactly. And to the point where and this is again part of the pitfalls of social media is that as we scroll, we think everyone is just a natural, everyone has made it. They're gonna see this episode and think you were always at this level, not realizing that you had to test, you had to put stuff out there. And to your point, yes, that who person you have to become will evolve, will grow, but knowing that it's a different person than who you are today is important. Meaning, because some people feel like, well, I got to grow into it. That's the no. I'm like, who is it? Let's name it. Like, say for you, Ross, what's the name of your superhero, your alter ego that you have to become to be great?
Oh, that's easy. WrestleMania.
I love it. I love it.
WrestleMania.
I love it. How does he respond to pressure?
I mean, he gets excited. He
Excellent.
gets excited. And I can say that because I was in cage fighting as a career path before, and that was the moniker that was given. And the scariest thing is being basically in your underwear in front of 1,000+ people and then
Yep.
on television, and somebody's trying to hurt you in front of your loved ones. And but like, what would he do?
There you
And my
go.
first, in my anyway, I can just go back in that, and it's sports, whether it's sports or
Mhm.
acting or art, doesn't matter what your passion or hobby is. Like, who are you when you're at play? And then be that person, at your best. Whether you're an amazing guitar player, everyone has a talent, everyone's good at something. But who are you? What person are you when you're at your best? And then bring that to the current thing you need to do to make money.
That's right. That's right. And what's nice is again, it's no different than actor showing up on set. Action,
Mhm.
because it's something we can turn on and turn off. You didn't treat me like I was a cage fighter, right? This is the Ross who's
No,
the podcaster who builds relationship, tells amazing stories, and then there's another Russell Mania who's in the ring and being able to become those individuals without being with still but while still being true to yourself is important because this goes back I'll just take a step back to personal development is that I also see individuals that haven't defined who they are as like if they have a family, they haven't defined who they are as a father, they haven't defined who they
mm,
are as a husband, they haven't defined who they are as a friend. So I do get a little deep in that respect to say, okay, because sometimes that brings a lot of fuel because I'm showing up in this pitch meeting to close this $1 million deal because Mike, the dad, has aspirations for the family. So being able to really identify the clearly articulate those individuals of who you are to individuals around you are priceless because then we don't become and again from a family perspective Mike I can't be Mike the CEO with my wife. She's like, what, get out of here. Like, who do you think you are? You know.
trust me, we've tried. It doesn't
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
Everyone
exactly.
listening, take it. If there's one takeaway,
Yep. Yep.
separation between household and
Yep.
business role usually is better for you.
Exactly.
That's too funny, Mike. So, my favorite section of the show is leave a question, ask a question. My last guest has this question for you,
Okay.
which is what will be the most important thing that you will give up on that you already know that will make the biggest change in your business? So, what is the thing you're not going to do? And by this being on New Year's Eve, it's a
Mm.
great New Year's resolution, unintended, or de-resolution. What will you stop doing?
What will I stop doing? I will say, I think, oh my goodness, that is a tough one. What will I stop doing? I think I will stop. I do have a tendency to, I think there's some things that I tend to put off just a little bit too long.
Mm,
Sometimes in serving clients, it's easy to kind of put like their goals, dreams, visions out front and almost judge like, hey, how are things going? And I'm thinking, well, with my clients, things are going well. And I think that is putting off some of my own kind of stuff, goals, dreams, visions. There's some things that I'm going to stop putting off. Even now, with a lot of the interviews I'm doing, is me putting myself first to be able to say, hey, because I've helped clients do podcasting and get in spaces. So I think that's one thing
mm,
I'm going to stop doing, kind of putting myself. And again, I believe a great coaching consultant, when they're with a client, they should feel as their number one. But again, when the Zoom goes off,
right.
being able to say, hey, wait a
The
minute.
behind the scenes.
Exactly. Kind of putting myself out front again.
That's awesome. Now, what question would you have for the next guest? Anything you like?
Okay, let's see. I think it would have to do with what is the greatest beyond being successful in your current area of expertise, what's the next most see, because what I'm saying is it's like for example, with me, some people look at success with founders based on money and how much money they've raised. But real, like just behind that, the most important thing is really the relationships they build. So I guess the question is, and maybe you can help me articulate, but beyond the normal measure of success, what's the next most important measure? Because no matter what you do, you always have that one thing. Like for again, in my space, it's the money we raise or the highest donation. But what's the next thing? And the next thing for me is building relationships.
When I look back at my time raising capital and doing mergers and acquisitions, somebody asked me, what was your biggest win? And my answer changed. I got a phone call from one of the guys I hired as an operations manager, and he had no management experience. And he called me to say thank you for the opportunity because now I just landed this other career, and my wife doesn't have to worry about bills, and we had our second kid. And he's like, because you bet on me years ago, now I'm in this new role. And he just like thanked me, and I was like, I just gave you a job because I thought you were the right guy, and I took a chance on you. But that
Hmm.
that made me feel really darn good. Anyway, you made me. I think that like what you said before, it's the relationships that you don't even know years down the road how they're going to go. But if you enter them with the good faith and you behave with good faith, you're going to get paid in more ways than just money.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, the last question I have is not that deep, but it is important. And it is, how can people connect with you? Where can people learn more, reach out, get in touch?
Sure. First and foremost, definitely go into personalitypitching.com. Also available on LinkedIn, Michael C. Clark, personality pitching. Definitely, if you mention that you heard me on the Thunder Stock Show, do a discovery call and throw in some extras in terms of feedback and a strategy session, but just mention you heard me on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. This is the last episode of the year. And as always, I don't have anything to sell you on the show, but my ask is if you found value, share it with a friend, right? That's the gift that keeps on giving. Everyone, be well and see you next year.